All right, everybody, we are live for this week's episode of the State of the Extreme podcast. This is for the week of September 5th. Welcome, everybody. I am, of course, Josh Bycer from Game Wisdom, and we have another great week's topic. We're continuing our multi-part look, and joining me, as always, from not as always going to be Nexus Games, Sharky.
Yep. And we've almost got a name set and for the new company name and almost a logo set. Well, we're getting there on the logo. We haven't
All right.
started, but we've concepted, but we haven't started the final logo because we don't have the final name yet, but we're getting there.
All
And
right.
hopefully I will give you this. The new name will have Nexus in it. And it'll either be a 2-word or 3-word name, and the other 2 words will be neon and interactive. So it'll
What
be
about pay to
either,
win?
huh?
What about pay to win?
No pay to win in the name. It'll either
All right.
be Neon Nexus, Neon Nexus Interactive, or Nexus Interactive. One of those 3.
Right. But we have another very lengthy part of our multi-look series about game dev not so secrets to success to get to. We are slowly but surely whittling down this list. And I think we're only have time to get 2 done today because we had 2 very meaty ones. So what are they this week?
Well, first we're going to start off with accepting criticism properly, and then we're going to be talking playtesting early and the phases of playtesting.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Hey,
we have
smoke that.
time, we'll get to more. But this may be going into a 5th part, depending on how long these are. If these 2 take up the whole thing, then there's a decent chance for a 5th part, which is actually the 6th part,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense. Because the this is the 5th part under this name, and then the first part or part 0 was the part before this under a different name.
Yeah.
Which all the links to all of them are down in the description of my video now and recorded. And I don't know if it's just recorded or live and recorded on your side.
Yeah. When it goes record, I'm going to try and get them all nicely collated once we get this whole multi-epic done.
But it's not in
But
there in the live version right now.
no, not in the live version.
It is in my live version.
All right. But accepting criticism. This is one that I think a lot of developers tend to miss. And when they do, it usually leads to long-standing issues with their games and their communities.
Yeah, failure on the accepting criticism properly is pretty much failure as a developer, period.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you fail this one thing, then you're going to fail almost everything.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I think this gets into a lot of the, I guess, quote unquote, soft skills that go into game development, or more importantly, maybe more on the PR, diplomatic side that a lot of people don't necessarily have. I mean, this is stuff that it's not, I think, easily learned. Like, you either have it or you don't, and if you don't, you're going to struggle how to talk to somebody, how to engage with people when they're not their most kindest.
Well, I don't necessarily think that feedback and whatnot, criticism, is really on the PR side. I mean, there's aspects of it that are certainly PR side, but
Hmm.
I feel like it's more on the game design side
Hmm.
because the most of the criticisms is of the game design, and
Hmm.
I think the second most would be of maybe the art side generally.
Hmm.
But like I feel like it's definitely targeted more squarely at the game design side, but you do have to talk to people, which is a people skill, which is sort of marketing side. So like it's one of those aspects that crosses fields kind of thing, and
Mhm.
it's a little bit of a lot of things. And
Yep.
I think as a game designer, you definitely need to be good at this. I think as a marketing person, you should certainly, marketing PR person, you should certainly have some of these skills in your bag kind of thing. But thing is a marketing PR person can only relay the messages. You know what I mean? They can't be like, oh, well, they didn't like the jump in our platformer, so I'm gonna go in there and adjust the game design document. You don't want the marketing person doing that. You want the game designer, which is a reason why I say it's more of a game designer kind of thing and more of an artist thing because it actually if you kind of think about it, it's more of a team leader thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It's
Because a
also
team leader
management as
needs
well.
to, be like, these are our problem. These are what we're getting feedback on. Hey, game designer, what can we do about these things? Hey, art guy, what can we do about these things? So like, it's crossing many different fields. It's a merging of fields, but I would say it's important for leadership, game, the game designers, the writers, I mean the artists to all definitely have skills in this.
Hmm. Yep. And I think what you said about kind of like like the production or management side is also very important because when we talk about accepting feedback and criticism, we're talking about this from like all aspects. So it's not just you going on Twitter or to a Discord group and asking people, what do you think of my game? But also showing it at conventions, showing it to people, running playtests in your studio. It's being open to the fact that people may not like your game or they may not like certain aspects of it. And what do you do after that?
Yeah, and the important part to realize is everybody out there in the world has a bias.
Hmm.
You know, whether they don't like your genre, whether they love your genre, whether they're indifferent about it, whether they hate you, whether they love you, whether they're indifferent about you, everybody has a bias in some direction kind of thing. And several of them, not just one. So, you've got to take that into account when you're taking feedback because here's the thing: if somebody says they don't like platforming, so just take all the platforming out of your platformer game, you obviously don't want to do that. Where if somebody says your platforming is shit and they love platformers, and you probably should listen pretty hard to that and ask them why they think it's shit. But
Hmm.
at the same time, you shouldn't ignore the person who said, take all the platforming out. What you should be doing is asking them why they think why do they think that you should do that kind of thing. And in that, you might find out that the reason why they say that is not because they want to remove all platforming in there, but because you don't have a shadow underneath your character and they can't tell where they're landing.
Yeah.
You know,
And
who knows?
this is something that I spoke with John Brieger about on several occasions when we talk about playtesting and reading between the lines of what people say about your game. And it's very important to understand that people will oftentimes they'll be able to cite the symptoms, but they won't get the problem of what's going
Hmm.
on with a game.
And
As
their
in,
suggestions are normally completely off the wall.
mhm.
But I
You
mean,
may
some people who really know game dev will give really good suggestions a lot of times.
Yeah. But again, you can't really rely on, everyone in your community and your fan base being a professional game developer and playtester.
Yeah,
That's not really going to happen.
yeah,
Now, of course, if you want to hire people to be playtesters, and we'll probably talk more about that in the next section, that's a different story. But if
yeah,
you're showing it to, friends and family, showing it to people on a Discord or Reddit group, whatever, you're basically throwing it to the wolves.
yeah. And I mean, I've said this before. When you're accepting criticism, don't generally don't, unless you have professional playtesters, don't take their solutions generally. You can take that into account, but don't take that as 100%. Matter of fact, in most cases, don't even take it 1% kind of thing. And
Mhm.
you know, you got to be Dr. Game Dev essentially. You have a patient that comes into the office. They're you know they say that they think they have uh an appendix ruptured kind of thing, and you don't just go in there and just be like, okay, their appendix is ruptured, and we'll take their word for it, and we'll just cut their appendix out. And you cut it out, and it's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with this appendix. You
Yeah,
don't want to do that. You got to be like, why do you think that your appendix is ruptured? Well, my stomach's hurting, this, that, and the other. I'm having a sharp pain here. I'm sharp, this, that, and the other. And you ask them questions, and it leads to many different possible answers. I mean, maybe the answer is that you know they haven't went shit in 5 weeks,
hmm
and that's the reason why they're in
and
pain. Maybe they have acid reflux. I mean, there's tons of reasons why your stomach can hurt. Maybe you
mhm.
have a stomach flu. Like there's many different things that could cause stomach pain,
It's
and
like WebMD. Everything's going to tell you have cancer.
yeah, it could be cancer. Probably not, but it could be.
And one thing that I really wanted to talk about is when a developer receives a pushback on anything regarding their game, could be as small as I don't like the color of your title screen to something as big as I hate how your game plays. Go fix it. And you need to, as a developer, and this is something that I see a lot. This is, I think, when we get into kind of like some of the issues when developers only talk to other developers, is that they tend to get into that bubble, the echo chamber effect for game dev. That
Well, I think it depends on what developers you're talking to, because like there are echo chambers in game development where people are just you find this a lot on Twitter where they're in their own little clique kind of thing,
Mhm.
and that's an echo chamber. But then there's also places where you can go where people will be like, yeah, I don't like this. This is the reason why I don't like it, and it all depends on what clique of game developers you're in. I mean, you can get into ones where they, making any kind of, images of somebody who's not white is cultural appropriation, or you can get into ones where that doesn't matter, and what matters is the quality of what's being made and that everything is being done well, kind of thing. Now, then that said, is other game developers do not necessarily know the best answers for your game because you are closer to your game than they are. But that is both a gift and a curse. So you gotta weigh it properly. Uh, it's I'm closer to my game, so I know that this ties into these mechanics, which they may not be implemented yet. So that feedback may be off on that because that's not implemented yet. At the same time, is you know so you got to take and consider what they said, and you're like, well, would that make sense? Do I think that would make my game better? And this is what makes you know uh game design itself so tricky and so hard to learn, because there is no if A then B, if C then D, or anything like that. It's
and then the game is done.
Yeah, it's if you have these 20 specific mechanics kind of thing, and people say these five different things about it, which are probably all not agreeing with each other, then what do you do to fix that? And you know, that's an important part about a game designer is you got to figure out what works best together. And it's not just a simple mathematical formula or anything that you can pull out of your butt.
Mhm. And another part about trying to accept feedback is that you need to look beyond your initial friends and family. You know, they're a great first step just to get something going, but you can't rely solely on that. And a big example of what I want to talk about, and what kind of made me really want to talk about this week, was we played the demo for this game, Arcadian Atlas. This was about a week and a half ago, and is a tactical strategy game very much in line with Ogre Battle, Final Fantasy Tactics, that kind of game. And it's on the PC, and it has no gamepad support and no mouse functionality. It is entirely keyboard driven, and the keyboard driven nature of it is just not good. You know, the keys are just laid out very weird, and people on the forums are, well, expectingly complaining about. And
Mm-hmm.
developers said the line that I'm pretty sure they must be watching the show, and this is just like all a attempt to make me crazy, just solely me, no one else. They said, well, we did play testing and we all found it perfectly fine. And I'm pretty sure, again, like, this is just aimed directly at me. Like, nobody else, this is just like a very long con just to drive me crazy when they said that. And the problem is that, one, if you're, and this is something that we talked about last week, when it comes to doing research and understanding what the market and what people expect out of different game mechanics, that if you're releasing a game on the PC, you kind of need mouse functionality. And then the second point is that you can't use the excuse, well, I enjoyed it, so surely it must be great, as your sole metric for playtesting. It is the same exact thing that I saw on the Tormented Souls forum when people were arguing about having basic map functionality and quality of life features, and somebody saying, "Oh, well, it worked fine for me," and that was like supposed to shut down the whole conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I created, it's like I created Google. I get all the money, or Facebook or whatever company. I steal everybody's information. I do all this stuff. It works fine for me, you know. I'm
Mhm.
lining my pocket, so it works fine for me. That's the equivalent of that. Yeah, yeah, that doesn't really work. And I want to hit on something you said earlier about friends and family for testers.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would not only not rely on that, I wouldn't even
Mhm.
I wouldn't even take that hardly into consideration. Like friends and family as testers is usually about as good as let's see here. What analogy can I use here? It's about as good as a 1 inch headphone jack cable on your headset. Good luck even attaching one ear to your headset, more or less wearing them comfortably. Or
Mhm.
both ears, kind of thing. Like friends and families as testers is just a give me. It's like I think that's lesser than putting single player as a tag on Steam. You know what I mean? It's not going to really help.
Can't fully hurt,
Yeah.
but it's just like
Well, it can if you depend on it.
yeah, it's just like space filler, I guess.
Yeah. It's fluff. It's the sawdust that you eat in your burrito. It's not there for taste. It is just there
And
for filler.
like friends and family can help to make sure that your game doesn't explode, that doesn't break somebody's computer. But if you're trying to get actual feedback, as in, is this game good? Do people enjoy it? You need to get in the hands of, well, a community of people who like the genre or are interested in it. And this is where kind of like the first line of accepting criticism can often fail.
I do want to put
Because
context in here, though, an exception. If you if
hmm,
you if I am your friend or family kind of thing, I am going to personally, tell you
hmm,
everything that's wrong with your game. I'm sure if Josh is your friend or family, he's also going to do that same thing. But most people are not Josh and I. But
hmm,
that said, is you know you really can't count on it. You know what I mean? So like
hmm,
apply like Mount Everest grain of salt to this.
hmm. But the point that I was getting to, yeah, exactly one.
Probably.
This first came up and close. I'll get to Smoke's question in a second. I won't get this train of thought out. Like the first area where a lot of people will fail at is when you get pushback. And again, this is where the whole accepting criticism and even just being able to accept it in real life really comes into play. That not everybody is going to like what you have to say. And you're going to have to be willing to listen. Now, does that mean you take everything everyone says as, the truth, it's etched in stone as a part of the commandments?
No.
No. But you do have to take that as a developer. Now, some people will argue, well, if somebody says something mean to me, I should just immediately ban them. And again, it really depends on what that quote unquote meanness is. If the
Feedback
meanness
isn't
is,
mean.
yeah, if the meanness is, shut the F up, you beep, 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 and again, I don't curse here, but you get the picture, then yeah, at that point, if that's how they're going to talk to you, they're not really going to help. But if their meanness is, your game plays horribly, I can't control it, this is just a horrible game, don't even try and release it, that's not really being mean. Again, I think it's important to clarify. There's a difference between saying your product is bad and saying you are bad. And a lot of developers really have trouble separating those two.
I would say there's a big difference. I would say there's a bigger difference here. That's not just you know targeting your game versus you. I would say the bigger difference is the truth versus not truth. If people saying you're just a scumbag and all this other stuff, it's not likely to be true. I mean, it could be true. You could be a scumbag, but I mean, you're not. That's if you're legitimately trying, that's not likely to be true. On the other hand, the fact is the truth hurts. And as a developer, you can't let the pain of truth get to you. If your control scheme is shit, your control scheme is shit. That is a 100% fact. That is the truth. And you can't let the truth hurt you. You can definitely not feel good about it, but you need to address it. Don't sweep it under the rug. Don't pretend like the truth does not happen. Don't go on to this whole fake news route, kind of thing, and just reject it, kind of thing. You've got to accept the truth, and the truth may not be what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear, and you need to address it. The fact is, truth
So,
hurts. I know I give people feedback, and every once in a while, I get people who just get really upset at me and just really come at me kind of thing. And it's like, hey, look, it's the truth. I am not going to hold back the truth. If you don't want to take the truth, then don't take it. But, I offer what I offer, and I offer it straightforward. I'm not going to bounce around and, say, I'm not going to bounce around the bush kind of thing. I'm just going to be like, arrow straight in the bush, in the duck that's hiding in the bush. I'm not going to beat around it kind of thing. And, of course, some people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but some people certainly cannot, take that as an insult. They like, that's too harsh and everything. The truth is harsh, and I'm telling you the truth, you know.
Yeah. But again, part of it is again how you approach someone with this. And again, that gets into, communication and psychology. That is way beyond the scope of our little cast this week.
But I
But
would say that's technically beating around the bush.
hmm
If you're having to apply these little methods and all that other stuff, because like
hmm
it works for most people. Most people will be like, "Oh, I see what you mean," and they just go at it, And
hmm
certain people, they just, don't like it, and
yeah.
you have to
And
beat around
again,
the bush with them, and I'm just not willing to do that.
hmm but when it comes to again, like delivering feedback, that's separate from accepting, and that will probably be another topic at some point. But one of the things I see a lot of developers struggle with again is what happens when your game makes first contact, when it's being shown, at a trade show, being put on, a game festival for the first time. And what do you do when people come back with thoughts and ideas? And again, there's two distinct areas of this. The first is, again, taking the feedback, and then the second part is what do you do with the feedback? And the thing is, they are both different. So, what happens when you get feedback? Like we've said, in the perfect world, everyone would give you a completely clear, itemized list of everything they liked and disliked about your game. And again, if you're paying people to play test your game, you may be able to ask them to do just that. But if you are showing this at a convention or whatever, and you are just letting out there for everyone to see, you are going to be getting everything. And like we've said many times over here, somebody saying that your game is the best game ever and there are no problems with it is just as useful to you as somebody saying this is the worst game ever, you're a horrible designer.
Yep. Or people saying beep 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 beep.
hmm Oh, yes.
It's you
hmm
you really have to just take what they say and figure out how to apply it. But when you're releasing your game to like a convention or something, that should definitely not be your first dose of feedback. Your first dose of feedback should be super early, like core gameplay loop early, like proxy art early. It should be as soon as you have something running, basically. And you should be getting feedback constantly throughout the process. And you should be getting new eyes in every once in a while to make sure that everything is going good, kind of thing. Because you know the thing with the controls, kind of thing. I suspect, that example you did earlier about the only keyboard controls and no mouse controls and everything. I suspect that those testers probably complained about that at the beginning. The developer ignored it, and then the testers no longer complained about it anymore because they got used to it. So like you got to
And
have fresh eyes to come in there and tell you that you need mouse support again
yeah,
if
and
you didn't
they
listen to it the first time. And I have, I try to listen to feedback as best as I can, but there are instances where somebody tells me something and then I either forget it, I'd be like, oh, I don't think that's right now, kind of thing, or that's something we're not going to add until later on, or something like that. And
Mhm.
then it's good when I get told a second time, by somebody else, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe or maybe I just dismiss it because I don't think it's important, kind of thing. But then when I get multiple people telling me it, then it's like, oh, maybe it is important.
Yeah, and when you are doing that kind of testing, and one of the things about the forum and about like that game is that they said they're only a four-man team. So they did basically all internal testing.
That's
And
not what you
this is
wanted.
something yeah, exactly. This we want to really avoid because, like we've said, developers are really good at ignoring their issues with their own game. Because if you've played the game 500, 1,000, 10,000 times, it's kind of like you getting used to a car that has, the steering wheel is a little loose and maybe the brake pads aren't really working right. You've used
Maybe
the
half
car
of the
so many
windows don't
times.
roll down.
Yeah. And it's great for you. But again, you put this in the hand of somebody or you're trying to sell that car to someone, they're gonna be like, why the hell would I want to buy a car where the steering wheel doesn't work all the time? And again, this is why you need to look outside of like your own group. Now, to get to Smokeback's question from earlier about what's the best start point for first game open or closed beta testing, and wait, do you think that would fit more into the playtesting section later?
Best point. Yeah, I think that would be better in the playtesting section.
All right, yeah, we'll talk about that one in a little bit. Let's see. But to Dev Journey's comment about tell people to focus on, like, again, like if you're showing, and I think this will also get into more of the playtesting as well, that if you're showing this game at a convention or, it's going up on a festival setting, you can't really tell consumers focus on this, this, and this. Don't look at this, and that. And,
And the thing is you it really has limited possibilities. Period. Because like I have submitted like just art mock-ups to you know game dev discords kind of thing, and I'm like I'm looking for feedback on this one item kind of thing, and then people like we and I'm specifically say right after that, and I'm not looking for feedback on the font. I know there's issues with it, but and then I get 20 comments to it, all complaining about the font, and nobody saying anything about the issue I wanted to ask about. So,
Mhm,
you know, you can't always get that. People
mhm,
will, even if you type it down in little words, if you tell them to it, people will often go for the low hanging fruit.
mhm.
Luckily, I got my font fixed now, so nobody complains about that anymore.
Yeah.
People complained about that constantly forever.
And again, the reason why people will complain about issues like this is that they are the most prevalent. You're not going to have a consumer or a normal consumer play your game and then type you a post saying, hey, on the 8th level, 20 minutes in, there's a sound loop bug when you jump up onto the green platform. They're not going to be giving you that. They're going to say again, your volume sliders don't work, controllers don't work. I turn the game on and your title starts spinning out of control and crashes my computer. And
What if that's on purpose?
well, then you got to be really careful with how you market that game. But
You
like,
market it as a Bethesda game.
yeah. But like one of the things, like another horror story that I've heard is from one of the guys who was running at Way Forward. They were talking about one of their friends who was at a trade show showing off their game, and every time people were having problems with it, he just said, give me the controls, I'll get you through it, or
Mm.
it's not the game's fault, you just don't understand it, and that is the complete opposite of accepting feedback. And we've said this before that if one person says they don't like something, you can mark that down. If 50 to 100 people say they don't like something, that should give you a clue that something is not right there. And to Juan's comment there, I think he said pretty well that being able to analyze games and break them down is a very specific skill.
Hmm.
It's not something a lot of people can do. And, like, I'm definitely one of the few people I think Shark is as well, that it's very hard to be able to break down design like this. And it's why not all feedback is created equal. Again, friends and family low end of the score here. Somebody who analyzes games for a living and is a professional playtester, that's going to be someone you really do want to listen to.
I,
And
I, I have to say, I don't know how to analyze games. I don't know why I'm here. I'm lost. Help me. Where's the nearest adult?
Mhm. But these are, again, all these elements of that will come back to bite you. And there are some things I think as a developer that you can't change. Like again, if you're making a game around submarines, and excuse me, somebody comes on your forum says, "I hate submarines. Make your game about airplanes." Yeah, like you're not going to get that person. And again, not every game, no game is designed for everybody.
What if you have
But
a submarine plane?
maybe, or an air sub. But
What about an Air Bud?
there we go. But you have to be able to understand where people are coming from. And there is a very, very huge difference between issues that can be improved and things that are inherent to a game. Something that I talked with Tomo about. That, if you're building a platformer and like you said as well, and somebody comes on the forum and says, I hate jumping, well, most likely they're not going to be a consumer of your game. But if somebody comes on your forum and says, I hate the fact that every time I jump, I can't see where I'm landing. Or, I jump and my character keeps moving while I'm in the air. Those are quality of life issues. And again, it's the same thing with Tormented Souls, that for a game that's about reading a map and understanding where you are, there is no dedicated map button. And they're kind of hemming and hawing at the moment as to whether or not they're going to put that into the game. But I can guarantee you that if they show that game to a group of playtesters, not fans, not themselves, but people outside, they probably would have complained about that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why you need to be really careful about only listening not only to your friends and family, but to your most hardened fans.
Yeah,
Because the hardened fans are almost, at that same level as a developer in terms of, you know, I enjoyed the game, so why are people complaining about this?
yeah. I want to go back to your point there about the first person saying I don't like jumping, and the other person saying I don't like that I can't see where I'm landing and all this other stuff.
Hmm.
The thing is that person who said I don't like jumping could say it could be for that same reason,
But they may not actually say
but they
that.
may not have the context or knowledge to be able to express it.
Hmm.
That's the reason why when somebody says something, even if it seems completely off, ask questions.
Yeah.
You know,
And
you gotta look into things. Don't just straight up dismiss them.
yeah. And to WB's comment there, yeah, and this is why, like, when I spoke with John Brieger, like, he basically tells everyone that he wants them to record their play sessions, and ideally have a face cam record that as well, because a lot of what people will think about a game, they're not going to say. Shark watching me play Chromasia, and, me going like this, like just making that face was enough to clue him in that, the record skipped there for a second during the playtime.
Mm-hmm. And I had done plenty of playtesting, but none of it was by video testing or anything like that.
Hmm.
So like I was just taking people at what they said kind of thing. And I should have definitely been watching videos of it.
Hmm. And again, like playtesting is one of those aspects, or I'm sorry, accepting feedback is one of those aspects that you need to really start doing it as early as you can. Now, with that said, though, the other point about this I wanted to touch on is that taking feedback and then what you do with that feedback. And what you do with that feedback, again, it really depends both on what that is and what you're able to do. Like we've said, no game has 100% marketability and retention. There is no such game that will ever hit that point. But there's a difference between, again, somebody saying, I don't like your game because it's an RPG, and I don't like your game because all the stats are confusing and I can't understand what things are doing. And being able to improve the UI and UX of your game, the quality of life features, these are universal elements, and they are parts about how you get this from feedback. Because if you don't improve on those aspects, you are really hurting your overall viability. Like we said, there are people who will buy your game and they don't give a damn about UI and UX. They don't care if there's bugs or if there's issues with your core gameplay loop. If and this goes back to Tormented Souls. Like if somebody's looking for Silent Hill, Resident Evil era survival horror, and there's all these issues over here, they're just going to completely tune that out. They're focusing on this point. But if you're trying to show this game to somebody who didn't grow up playing Silent Hill and Resident Evil, or somebody who's just looking for a horror game and they don't have that background, they're going to get all these issues and they're just going to be like, no. Like, why would I want to deal with that to play your game?
Yeah, and El Gordo makes a good point about feedback needs to be filtered. Not everything is useful. Well, I would say
Mm-hmm.
everything is useful, but not directly useful.
Mm-hmm.
You again, you have to ask the questions and get to more of the core rather than just you know taking it for word. I mean, like El Gordo, submitted some feedback the other day and a few times on the same thing, and I've done things to address it, kind of thing, and none of them are working really.
Mm-hmm.
But like you know. None of them are the suggestion he suggested because the fact is the one that he suggested I know for a fact will not work, kind of thing.
And that is another point that consumers are really great at pointing out issues, but they're oftentimes not the best when it comes to the solution. You can put on your forum, uh, people, how do we make boss fights more interesting? And you will get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Hopefully, you have people playing your game, of course, of suggestions. And most of them will probably not even be feasible. Somebody could suggest, hey, why don't you just completely rebuild your entire game around new mechanics? Or just add in brand new systems for these boss fights when the game is 90% done. You can completely rebuild your game, in a week, right, Shark?
Yeah, absolutely. All you gotta do, well, you can do it in an hour if you skip lunch.
Yeah. And like one, just make a faster horse. Throw nitrous on the horse, and you'll have a better racehorse. And let's include that as a vision of the game. Yeah, and again, like to WP's comment, it's that line you have to really walk as a developer. That your core gameplay loop, your moment-to-moment gameplay, that's your foundation. That is, what's that term they use? A bedrock. That cannot change. Again, if your game is about X, whether that is survival horror, racing, shooting, platform, whatever, you can't change that. But the aspects that you attach to that core gameplay loop, that is malleable. And you have to be willing to bend on those aspects. Again, if you're building a platformer and somebody says don't make a platformer, you can't get around that. But if they have issues with things that are getting in the way of platforming, that stuff should be, red alert, sound the siren alarm in your head. Because if people can't enjoy what you're building your game around, something is not working.
Right. What about a survival horror racing game?
And we've seen those. I think I played one or two of those too.
How did that come off to you since you hate racing and love horror?
Not bad. It was okay.
The same as all games.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, like as Ogordo said, that your vision for the game at the end of the day is still important. But when you start showing your game to people, you have to be willing to take that feedback and understand that people may not like your game. And unfortunately, that can happen. That the game that you spent 2 years, 10 years, even, 40 minutes on, if you're doing a game jam game, that somebody will come up to you and say, I hate this game. It just does not work for me. And while, you shouldn't immediately internalize that and change your whole game, you can't just shut down because somebody says they don't like your product.
I mean, if they don't like your product, I mean, you should just go on Twitter and cry about it, and then tell them that they refunded, the game, you know,
Yeah.
and people will, and you'll succeed.
Yeah. And again, this is one of those things where, again, that developer echo chamber that I've seen a few times happens that, people say, no, there's no problems with your game, or they don't like it if you point out issues with it. And you have to be really careful about that because if you're not accepting criticism, then you're not seeing where people are having problems with your game. And unfortunately, there are some times where the problem with your game is the game itself. As in, let's say you do come up with that insane core gameplay loop of it's a cooking, racing, survival horror visual novel sim. Nobody's ever done that before. And you're the first one to do it, and you put that in people's hands, and everybody hates it. What do you do? Do you keep making that game? Do you try to, right a sinking ship? Or do you, say, maybe this idea isn't going to be my next 3 to 5 year project?
I would say neither of those, none of the above. I would say you go ask questions, find out why it's not working for each person, and then take, once you have that more accurate information directly, then you take that and you see which direction you need to go in.
But at the end of the day, sometimes a project has to be scrapped.
Yeah, and
And
that very well could be the direction that you go in, because like, maybe, it's just that, the audience does not cross over, could be that,
mhm,
the audience from this part of the game does not like this part of the game, and the audience from this part doesn't like this part. So there's you cannot have those two parts. So you either have to scrap it, or you have to scrap one of the parts or the other. And
yep,
and then, and that will only work is if, when you scrap one of them, you can still make a cohesive game that isn't just, missing an arm or a leg or whatever.
mhm. And again, like to WB's comment, like this definitely leads into another topic about, again, what is in the market today. And you have to be very much aware of it. Something we talked about, I think, on the 2 parts ago, that if you're trying to make a retro-minded game, you don't want to include the warts and the flaws of those retro games. Because if
Hmm.
you do, you're not going to win new fans. And it's a very careful line you have to walk.
And
Because there are
those
people,
original developers would not have included those warts and everything had
yeah,
they had a choice,
yeah,
because engine limitations, all that kind of thing, were a thing back then.
and
And it
don't
was
forget,
like, we either have to include these warts or we can't make this game.
and
So let's
don't
make it
forget,
with the
like
warts.
nobody was studying game design back then.
Yeah, that
There
too.
wasn't, there weren't other first-person shooters, to study. There weren't, when XCOM came out, nobody else was making XCOM. They had to build it pretty much sight unseen at that point. And it's something you have to be aware of. And again, this again goes back to criticism that just because you're a big fan of X doesn't mean everyone else is a big fan of it. And we've seen this in a lot of like kind of more difficulty focused games, where the difficulty could be, hey, let's make it that the screen flickers really rapidly when something scary is going to happen, but it could also cause seizures. But it's a artistic choice by a developer. No, you don't want.
Artistic seizures.
Yeah, that's not so much say the extreme. That's adding more lawsuits right there.
Extremely lawsuit.
There. And this is again why you have to be very open to criticism and feedback, because people don't have your same experience. Something that you find incredibly easy, somebody else could find notoriously difficult, and vice versa. And this is why, as Shark said, as we've said many times, you need as large of a pool of people looking at your game as you can. Because without having that wide spectrum, you're not really going to see the complete picture as to what people think of your game.
Yep. Is there anything we want to hit on this before we move to the next
I
topic?
was
Because
just
we're
thinking that.
probably at about an hour or something now. So,
Yeah. I'm trying to think anything on your side you want to talk about when it comes to criticism.
uh, not anything I can think of that we can't hit in playtesting.
Yeah. I was going to mention like the Arcadia game, they have a what was it? A feedback form that you can fill out to talk
Oh
about how your
God.
game is. Yeah, again, do not make it difficult for people to leave you feedback.
Yeah,
And
any place somebody, yes, it would be good to have a forum. Do not force people to use the forum.
yeah,
Do not force people to leave one avenue to give you
it's
feedback. Yes, the feedback on the forum is more useful to you,
mhm.
but do not kneecap yourself and only accept that. Have give them a forum, give them a forum,
Discord.
give them
Give them
Discord, give them voice chat, give them everything, because you do not want to obstruct feedback in any way.
It's the same when it comes to when we talk about marketing. That you don't want people to have to try and hunt you down. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to get in touch with you.
Yeah,
Because again, some people they'll do all those steps, they'll jump through all those hoops for you. But the majority are not. And that's the people that you want to hear from. You want to hear from people who are on the fence. People who are wondering, should I get this? Should I not? I don't know. Like, those are the people that you have the greatest potential to convert. Again, somebody who says, I hate platformers, and they play your platform and say, I hate this game, most likely they're going to be that consumer who will buy your game, load up for maybe 20 to 30 seconds, or they'll get it from a humble bundle, and then they'll click right off and you'll never see them again.
yep,
And that's the kind of people you shouldn't be chasing. It They're not going to be your market. But somebody who is like, I like this developer, or so and so showed me this game and it looked cool, I want to try it out. That is your biggest potential for converting them into a fan. And those are the people who you want to make your game as polished and as refined as possible to get them interested in it. It's something that we talked about last week when it comes to marketing. That like with the YouTube channel here, and I'm still going to have to do updates. I got to remove all those playlists after we're done with the stream. But your fans don't care about problems. They will probably never submit actual criticism of your game. They're not who you're really targeting once your game is kind of in development and you're marketing it. You want to target the people who don't know your name, who don't have the entire background in that genre. And they're the ones who will ultimately make or break your title. Because making a game that only 500 people really like is not how you establish a market and a consumer base for yourself.
yeah. That's how you establish a death for yourself.
But let us move on to playtest. And I think this will probably be a good 30 to 40 minutes easily. So we probably won't have time to get to another topic,
No,
but
definitely
we'll
not.
Yeah,
It's basically time to end, and we're just now starting the second topic.
yeah. So let's get to these questions because I think they're really good, solid ones that were mentioned as kind of how to begin. So let's get what Smokeback said earlier. What's the best start point for first game open or closed beta testing? And like we've said, when it comes time to play testing, you need to have something concrete. Like you shouldn't be sending out a version of your game that you don't even know what your core gameplay loop is. You need to have something that people can actually look at and experience.
Yeah, which should be at the very beginning of development, kind of thing.
Hmm.
You should have your core gameplay loop really solid at the beginning. Of course, you need feedback to get that gameplay loop solid, but you want so you want to start playtesting the second you have something playable.
Hmm.
Now, you do not want to start massive playtesting. You only want to be, playtesting with a few people to see if this core gameplay loop has legs and what you need to adjust in it. And you just go back and forth, and you either, just scrap the project early or you continue development. Whichever way the thing is going based off of feedback. And then once you get that established kind of thing, then you start going in and adding to it. And when you're adding to it, start boosting up your testing and whatnot. The testers, quantity.
Hmm.
And you build that up. And you want to be doing that in alpha and concept phases. You don't want to wait for beta. Beta beta's after you've gotten tons and tons of feedback. Beta is when the game is done, it's just not finished, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and
The,
I think there's a good way to kind of clarify that point. That when we say the game is done, or when the gameplay is done but not finished, what we mean is that somebody can load up your game. There will be temp art. There can be levels missing. There can be no music, no vocals, anything like that. But I should be able to play your game at this state and know exactly what the gameplay is going to be. Everything that is quote unquote playable or what this game is going to be about should be in this. And if it's not, then you're going to need to have another play test or another round of it when that's in that game.
I would say you even need more than that to be beta. Beta's for when the game is done, it's just missing polish and
Hmm.
final feedback kind of thing, and that kind of thing. Final UX adjustments, final UI
Hmm.
adjustments, final adjustments on everything. Beta is a tweaking and polishing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
alpha would
missing
be.
levels or anything like that.
Mhm.
Alpha would be missing levels kind of thing until you get
And
to the end.
features.
What you're
Hmm.
talking about would be like a late alpha, mid to late alpha kind of thing,
Hmm.
where a beta is like a complete game. It's just
Hmm.
not a shippable product yet because it still needs more polish, it still needs more tweaking and tuning, that kind of thing.
But with that said, though, there are exceptions. Like when Clay releases one of their games onto beta on early access,
Oh yeah,
most often those games are like 90 to 95% done. Like the only thing that's left for them to do is just do final tweaks. But you could probably just take one of their early access betas and release it as another developer. But again, that is more the exception. And
yeah,
yeah, I think
but
with Shark.
their betas are different because like
Mhm.
I mean when they go into early access kind of thing, I mean it is legitimately early access, so it's actually an alpha at that point. But a Clay alpha is a lot like a normal developer's release, kind of thing.
Yeah. For most developers, however, you're going to be doing things a little bit differently. And like we've said, like if you're in the alpha, if your game is still in alpha and you're testing that version, then yeah, things are going to be missing. There's going to be features not in, the polish is certainly not going to be there. And this is the state of your game where once you show the consumers, it should be at its most malleable in terms of changing things around, adding, removing systems, etc. Once you're
Hmm.
in beta, however, That's when things get locked down. If
Hmm.
somebody comes up to you in beta and says, "Hey, why don't you add in a brand new cooking system to your game?" No, maybe save that for a sequel. But you need to be, as a developer, able to kind of know when to open things up and know when to lock them down and just focus on the game.
Yep. Gotta lock it
And
down.
yeah, and again, like there are when people go into beta or when they go into early access. I know we've certainly had this conversation many times
You know,
that
early access is generally referring to alphas.
yeah, some developers will go in at very different times. Some people will show version 0.001 of their game and immediately put it on early access, or they'll show it to people. And there's just no feedback there. Like if your entire game is, a square shooting circles at triangles, how much feedback are you really going to be able to get out of people? Or then, yeah, I like the circle hitting a triangle.
Well,
That's
it
it.
depends on if it's just shapes and beats.
Hmm. Yeah, there you go.
But uh, the 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 thing about going into uh early access and whatnot, since we've hit on that, is that when you go in, you can't just go in at an alpha stage. You
Hmm.
have to go in at a blend between alpha and beta kind of thing, because you need that polish. If you do not have that polish kind of thing, then your game is not likely to succeed on early access.
Hmm.
And so, like, at that point, you need it to both be an alpha, but also a beta at the same time. And it's or maybe even a release, because it's like post beta kind of thing.
Hmm.
And it's really hard to get early access right kind of thing. But you know, the I think the best way to get early access right is you get the game very far along, and you get it very polished kind of thing, and you just have extra systems that you're going to add on top of that. Consider it kind of like this is a full release, and then we're going to add DLC on top of it kind of thing. And I think that would be the best method of early access kind of thing. But
Hmm.
the release is not like the best it could be.
Yeah.
But it's not bad either. There's your term. It's not
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. And another point is that if you're looking for a lot of feedback, you want to be very specific in terms of new versions of your game to show. Because we see another point is that a developer will go, okay, we have a list of, let's say, 100 bugs and complaints about my game. Fix issue 1, release a new version for playtesting. Fix issue 2, release another version. You want, if people complain about things, you want to get all that stuff taken care of before you give them another build. Because if those same issues are in the game, they're still going to be focusing on them.
Yeah, I've seen accounts of this on your Discord. I'm not going to name names, to where people would make a build of a game and then submit it for feedback, and people feedback, and they give they say certain things about the game, and then they leave, and then like 3 months later, 6 months later, they come back and get more feedback, but they
Mhm.
bring the exact same build. They've changed literally nothing, and then they get less feedback, and it's all the same feedback kind of thing. And then they a few months later, they do the same thing, and then they're like, "Why is nobody giving me feedback?" Because you're not
Yeah.
listening to the feedback.
And they're still having the same problems with your game. And to Olguro's comment, the further development, the less you can change. Yep, and that is certainly true as well. And this is again why early play testing and early feedback are very important.
Yeah, but
If
also to El Gordo's point, is putting polishing as part of the early access process is a bad idea, because Steam. counts a early access release the same as a full release, and the main thing that's going to sell your game is the art aesthetics and polish. And
Yeah.
if
And
those are not there, then your game tanks, and it was because you left those for the early access.
yeah, and that's another point as well, that early access is not the same as playtesting. You can certainly you many developers will use early access as part of their playtesting point, but you don't want, as Shark said, wait until your game's in early access to then do all the polish and refinement of your title. Because that's how you don't get people to buy your game.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, again, be very careful about when you show people your title like this, because you want to get as much feedback as possible. And again, people, unless you are paying them, like we said earlier, that if you are going out and you are hiring professional play testers, or you are actually paying them saying, I want you to play my game, you know, if it's a 10-hour game, I want you to play this entire game. I want you to record every single thing that you did in this game. Then, yeah, they're going to do that because you're paying them. But if you're doing, like just say a private beta or, a fan beta or a closed beta or whatever like that, then you have to be really careful in terms of what you show them and what is your ultimate goal. And this, I think, is a good lead into who said that? Simon Slav Studio. I butchered that too badly. About what you should tell people to focus on. Again, if you're doing kind of like an open beta, if you're just putting your game on Steam, you're putting up a 40-hour demo, you can't really do that there. But if you are actually hiring people, or you're, pruning a list of your hardcore fans and saying these 10 people are going to be in my closed beta, then it is important to figure out what do you want them to focus on. If you're, let's say you're releasing a game and you don't have the art assets done yet, and you just want feedback on mechanics, you need to tell them, well, the art is all temp art for right now, but, focus on how this game plays.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's nice to get focused feedback, but it's not always possible. And certainly, here's kind of the anti-consumer part of early access kind of thing is, in a way, you're charging them to be your playtester. Which is the inverse of them paying you paying them to do playtesting kind of thing. So like, it's it's you need to give them a good enough game that they are enjoying it legitimately. And of course, when it comes to early access games, we've talked about this in the past, is you have to give them a game that only certain games that are able to actually pull off early access, because it needs to be replayable to all heck. Because if it's not replayable to all heck, then early access is going to be a crash for you. And when I say replayable to at a extreme degree, I don't mean that it's possible to replay it and there's a lot of content that they could replay. I mean, there's a lot of want to, like
Mm-hmm.
in a Rogue, there is plenty of reason to replay over and over again. In a
Or a
story-based
multiplayer based.
RPG, turn-based RPG, there is basically no reason to replay other than for story, and that would only be the hardcore people, and that would be a horrible failing of an early access game.
Yeah. And like multiplayer would be an example of a good one. People want to keep replaying that.
Yeah,
And again, there are always going to be exceptions to these rules as well. I know Library of Runa was in early access, and that is a turn-based, story-driven, deck building RPG. And they had a lot of people who kept playing it and trying to find new stuff.
but the
But
deck building and whatnot is
mhm,
probably what gave it that replayability.
yeah, and you have to be, again, when you are showing your game off to people, when you're looking for feedback and playtesting on it, you need to make sure that there is a point to it. If you just completely rebuilt the entire jumping systems of your platformer, then you need a lot of feedback on that to make sure how that works.
Yep.
If all you
But
did was
if you're rebuilding your entire system on jumping kind of thing, that needs to be right at the very beginning of development because that should be a result of everybody telling you the first set of
Mhm.
jumping mechanics in your gray room with a couple boxes in it was horrible. Completely rebuild it. You know, you
Yeah,
should
you don't
not.
want to be waiting until early access to find out that you need to rebuild your platforming.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's like alpha or pre-alpha talk of what,
yeah. That's
when it
core
comes to
gameplay
core
loop.
gameplay. Yeah,
That is
but
start of the wrong.
hmm but you want to be able to get as much targeted feedback as you can. Like we said in the last part with the Arcadia Atlas example, that waiting that having forums, having people submit stuff for feedback, or I'm sorry, Arcadia Atlas. That that's great to kind of organize it, but you don't want to make it hard to give feedback to your game. Um, Orkin, I know they had their own. I think it was the Amantis tool that they had for all playtesting feedback bugs that they use for anyone. I think you just had to sum to their forum, and you could use that feedback tool, and that does help. But again, as you start to open up your game to more people, and there's more versions of it out there for people to experience, you need to be able, like any place that your game can be played, you need to be able to get feedback from it.
Yep. And I want to hit on this kind of second phase of this, if you forgive the pun, you know, or
Hmm.
don't forgive it, the phases of playtesting.
Hmm.
And there's a order and phase kind of playtesting. You have your super early playtesting where you're playtesting your concept, making sure that your core gameplay loop is on point. Then there's your initial first alphas kind of thing when you're building out the systems and everything and getting something that feels more complete. Still not complete, but more complete. It feels like a game and less like a core gameplay loop. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then you have your later alpha where you're going through and you're kind of putting the cap ends on all of your systems and you're completing all your system, making sure everything meshes well together, and making sure everything works like clockwork, essentially. These gears
Hmm.
into these gears, they mesh and everything turns the way it's supposed to. And, then you kind of get to the final part of that where you think everything is good now. Everything is solid, everything seems solid. You just need to polish, and that's when you start beta. You may still find issues there with gameplay and systems and such. Like maybe the dodging is too often. Maybe this is too it's all these tweaking and tunings kind of thing more than just replacing systems kind of thing, and
Hmm.
you're doing this, and that would be your beta phase, and you're tweaking and tuning while you're adding polish and all these other things, and this is also the phase when you put your tutorial in. You
And
don't want to put your tutorial in from the beginning because
mhm,
your gameplay loop, all your gameplay and your gameplay systems are constantly changing during that time. So you would have to keep on remaking your tutorial over and over again. But this point is when you put your tutorial in, and
mhm,
this is when you go to beta and you're putting your tutorial in and all this other stuff. This is the most important time to have fresh eyes come in as well as critical eyes come in and just be like, okay, I'm going to be extra critical. I'm going to, I haven't seen much of this game yet, and I am going to do what I can to tear it apart, and see what they can come up with. And, you keep on tweaking and tuning based off of what they say. And it wouldn't hurt to have another fresh eyes later on in beta. And, you know, the more fresh eyes you can get in there, the better over time. But, as a small developer, that is understandably hard. I know
Yes.
that I had a I had a lot of issues with this. I was able to get maybe two testers, for that core gameplay loop kind of thing, and two or three, and most of them fell out, after that. And then I got about three or four for the first, half of alpha, and half of them fell out. So I only had like three or four testers at that point, and then like I got a few more people in the second half of alpha, maybe like five, and like I think like three or four of them fell out. So like I had like at that point I had like five or six people on board, and then
Hmm.
for the first beta I had see here, I think I had like six or seven really critical people come in, and of
Hmm.
course three or four of them fell out, and you know carried forward with like eight people or so, and then I wasn't able to get any more people after that. No, actually, I did get one person after that, which then carried it farther. But like each one of those phases, it's important. It's good to get fresh eyes, but I understand if you can't. But you really need to try, and you really need to try to get higher numbers than what I had. But I understand if you can't, because getting testers is extremely hard.
Yeah. And that I think is another thing it's good to clarify for people watching as we're talking about this. Like you can put your game up on itch or Steam and 500 people will want to play it. No, like unfortunately, unless you are, a Clay, a Kid Fox, Red Hook, their games could go into an open beta and they will get lots of people to play them. And at that point, again, that's when you become your own marketing. When your company can say, hey, we're looking for a few people to try this game out. Would you like to do it? And 10,000 people sign up for it.
Yep.
For most developers, however, you are unfortunately are going to be begging and pleading, and every individual playtester is going to be like pulling teeth to get them to play your game.
Yeah, I know
And
that you know, that I would go into many different discords. I wasn't in your Discord at the time, but I would have went into your Discord in general and be like, "Hey, I got a game that I need to play test. Is anybody interested in joining in on it? Let me tell you a couple things about the game, kind of thing, before you sign up.
mhm,
It's a tactical RPG, blah blah blah, and and I did that kind of thing on many different Discords, and I did it repeatedly a lot in the same discords kind of thing, like I didn't like every week go in there and be like, hey, I need testers kind of thing, but maybe every month or two I would go in that same discord and be like, ask again, you know what I mean?
yeah, and you
And
have to have.
so many times I would get zero replies, so
Mhm.
do not be disheartened by that, because trust me, it is extremely hard, and I am fully aware of that. And I would go around and ask in maybe 5, 10 discords kind of thing for testers, and every couple months kind of thing, and most of the time all discords combined resulted in zero replies, zero. But every once in a while I would get a single reply, I would submit them in kind of thing, and then I would get and then those all added up over time, and then when they went into actually test kind of thing, some of them either got the key and then didn't do anything with it. Some of them got the key, played it, and then didn't give me any feedback, and those people I made exit out of the program kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the ones that did submit feedback and everything, we continued forward, and
Mhm.
and it kept on
And
going, and it was over time, you slowly grow those numbers.
And I need to also clarify something very important as well. That when you're releasing new content, when you're building new stuff out, you need to get that stuff play tested. Because you can have, one second, excuse me, you can have 90% of your game completely done, play tested, iterate on, it's finished, and then release 10% more content that is completely not play tested, and it can certainly wreck your title, or at
Mm-hmm.
least give it a very big, red stain on it. And the reason why I say this is because that's what kind of happened with Red Hook Games and Darkest Dungeon. That they explicitly saved the final area, the actual Darkest Dungeon, for 1.0. So people didn't give them a lot of feedback on it. And when it was released, there were a lot of complaints about it. A lot of people found it too difficult. They found the concepts too annoying. That's when the game really becomes a grind. And oh man, voice is really dying on me. And this is something that we've said many times over. That I am sure every one of you, I'm sure Shark as well, can pinpoint an element in a game where they go, did anyone even play test this? Did anyone even look at this? It's such a problem with this game that it sticks out like so much of a sore thumb. How could people not see it?
And it could be
And
because you didn't have any fresh eyes,
mhm,
so they
yeah.
they didn't, they
Or
were used to it and they didn't see it, or they just didn't test it at all.
or there's a third one. They tested it, people said there were issues with it, and they ignored it, or they didn't act on it.
Yeah.
And that can happen. And you have to again be very aware of how all this plays out. Like we said in the last part, do you jump on every feedback and commit 100% to it?
No.
No. But you need to understand what is priority in your game. If somebody finds an issue that, let's say, one of the clothing assets, belt number 4 doesn't fit right on, certain character models versus, hey, the game crashes every time we do this third boss fight. One of those has a greater focus, one has more priority.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to organize this. I remember when I spoke with the developers of Battle Brothers, and they told me how they had essentially an itemized list of things that must be fixed, things we would like to get fixed, things that are issues but not that big of a deal, and what we would like to put in, given more time, money, and more people working on the game. And it's important to be able to compartmentalize these points because UI UX issues that would be up here. Somebody saying that, I want my character to have green shorts instead of blue pants, that would be down here.
Yeah. And to Ryan's point, Ryan says, as long as we're talking about a free version, I find itch really great for getting early feedback.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of players are really open to it on there. The issue with that is, yes, you can get lots of early feedback, but at that point, you've already released your game. And when you've already
Mm,
released your game,
on
you
itch,
have
mm,
issues. The
I,
the thing is that as you're not foobarring all of your release kind of thing because you still hopefully have a Steam version to release after that, but you're still killing your
mm,
sales.
yeah, like if it's just on itch, like nowhere else, then I think you are okay using it because again, as the pro and con of itch, itch is essentially an open storefront, but it's also not the main consumer one. So I think if your game is just solely on itch and you're using each version as feedback, I think that's okay. Now, if you
I
try that again on Steam and itch, that's a far different story because like we've said, Steam for a lot of developers is going to be your biggest source of consumers. And whatever you put on Steam, that is your product. Whether, it's had 3 years of playtesting and work done, or 3 months of it done. And you have to be aware of that.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's still putting it out on the itch. You're still going to create churn out of your consumer base, and those consumers are never going to come back.
Well,
And when you release your Steam version, so you are still churning players out of there. It's just not at a high number like it would be on Steam. So
now
it's
if
it's
you
far better than releasing on Steam, but I think still a private testing or a closed testing is better.
Here's a question. If you explicitly put it on itch saying that this is a demo or prologue, I think that may also affect the psychology of it. Saying that, this isn't even the finished version of the game. This is just a demo that I want to put out to show people what this game could be. I think that can also affect things as well. Yeah, like what Ryan just said, like a tech demo, a prototype build. But I think again, like Shark said, you will get some churn, but not in the same way as you saying, this is my finished game, and there's still 4 years of development on it. That's a different connotation.
Yeah. If you specifically label it as a tech demo or something like that,
Prototype, or prologue,
yeah. But it's very important that you label it that.
and
Have it
have it
in
in
the
your
name,
game. Have that in the actual file too. So when someone
Yeah.
loads it up, it says, so and so tech demo or prototype or demo.
Yep. And
And
and it would probably also be good if you're still labeling the game off of a project name and not the final name. For example, my current game is named Neon Continuum. The
mhm,
project name for it was Project Triad. So
yeah.
when people see Neon Continuum, they're not going to associate it with Project Triad.
And that also goes into marketing as well, because you want to show screenshots and footage of Neon Continuum. You
Yep,
want people to be seeing screenshots and images of Project Nexus.
or Project Triad.
Oh yeah.
The thing is Google will find the first thing that is listed as Neon Continuum. Uh oh, your camera's going nuts.
There we go.
And it will show that on there. So like my worst version will be the version that Google will show up in images or anything else. And you definitely don't want that. So you really want a separate name if you're going to do something like that
Mhm.
on itch. Just
Yep. And marketing it as well and all that.
yeah.
And to Caesar's comment, yeah, and that again is something you have to be very aware when it comes to playtesting. And it's something we talked about in the first part with accepting feedback and criticism. That you have to be willing to bend and you have to be willing to hold your position. But where you fall on those two lines is very important. And again, it's one of the reasons why this conversation that we're having is being broken up into so many parts. Because they're all interconnected in some way, shape, or form. If you're not good at playtesting your game, then you're probably not good at getting feedback. If you're not good at getting feedback, it means your game is not going to be the most polished point it can be, which will affect your marketing, which will affect how you do PR. And
Mm-hmm.
like we've said, it's very rare for any game to fail because of one thing. I mean, literally just one thing wrong your game is done. It's always that one thing is usually the tip of the iceberg. And there's 20 to 30 other things that have all been given root because of it.
Well, then you got lucky, Ryan. I would not count on that.
Now,
And
there are some. I do think there are exceptions. I know Ceridian Dice is coming to Steam, and they were titled the same thing on itch. And that was a game that was already really solid to begin with. It's not on Steam yet. The other one, the terraforming one that got picked up by what was it, Devolver? Yeah, Terra Nil. which I'm surprised I didn't wishlist this. That one was put on itch as just Terra Nil. Now again, when people played it, it was only I think four levels long, but you got a very full experience out of that. And of course, that's going to be expanded on in the Steam version.
Mm-hmm.
Slipways, thank you. That's another one. And I know there's several. The puppet combo games, they have all been on itch for a very long time, and they're now slowly but surely getting full, Steam versions that will scare the you know what out of a lot of people. But again, though, it's important to clarify that these games were successful on itch. It wasn't we're going to co-develop the game on itch and Steam at the same time. It was the itch version of the game is done. This is a complete experience. This is everything we want in this version of the game. Now we're going to do everything bigger and bolder and more exciting in the Steam version.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is you know you're counting on success at that rate, or at least a way broader success, because otherwise Google is not going to favor the new over the old. And if you churn enough people on itch, then and you don't market on Steam, then you're going to see old screenshots of that on the store. Oops.
I mean, for right now, I did search Game Dev Masters on Google, and the store page on Steam is the first one that popped up. Let me see if I do
Yeah,
Game
but
Dev
what about
Masters Steam.
images?
Let's
When you
see.
see images, do you see?
I see two from the Steam page. I see YouTube. I see the Steam DB page, which it looks like it's using the older thumbnail. And then I'm just seeing screenshots. I can't tell, what phase of the game they're from. But I am not seeing itch anywhere. So it may have actually overtaken it. The light green room is the tech demo. Okay, so that is the eighth image on if I look it up on Google Images. So it has, I think, overtaken it. But again, though, there are,
It's
and
a
I think
risk.
again, yeah, and it also depends on how you're positioning and showing your game off. That you can say that this is and I think another thing could be just the lower footprint of itch compared to Steam as well, because there are a lot of games I try to search for that if they're itch only, even just typing in the name may not be enough to actually find it on Google. I oftentimes had to type in game name itch.io to actually pull it up.
Hmm. That may be because itch does not, maybe not, uh uh what's the
It
term,
may
uh
be big
tag
enough.
tag your stuff properly.
Maybe unfortunately, we're not 100% sure, and that is definitely getting off topic. But as a time check, we are about to hit 90 minutes in, maybe give or take a few. Uh, do you want to start to wrap things up? Are there any other points regarding playtesting, excuse me, and the phases of it that we didn't touch on yet?
I don't think there's anything we need to hit on right now,
All right. Let me see.
and we're definitely
So,
way over time.
yeah. So, to wrap things up for this section and for the topic in general,
No,
that
for
again,
this part of the topic,
yeah,
this is what part three,
hmm
technically part four, because part zero.
yeah. So, when it comes to playtesting, you have to be aware of what your goal is with it. If your goal is to accept, mechanical issues or, see if there's any issues with the gameplay loop and mechanics like that, then your version there shouldn't be any other issues with your game. It is also, some developers I think have released kind of specific betas that, let's say, this is the gameplay beta. We're not going to show any story. We're not going to show any cutscenes. We're just going to have you play, battle to battle to battle. Let us know what you think. And then we could have a story driven one, things along those lines. And I think that could work for closed betas and, private testing. But if you're putting your game out there, like if you are
I wouldn't. It
having
wouldn't
it,
be a beta. It would be a closed alpha.
yeah, but if you are actually putting your game on itch or you're putting on Steam, if you're putting it out there for people to see, then you want to have the best possible version of it. If you have, and this I think one final point we didn't touch on, if you actually have issues with your game, like these are ones that you 100% know they're in this game, get them fixed before you try and release it as an open beta or an open demo. Because people are going to find them and they're going to sully the experience of it. You want to give them as much of a good experience of your game, even if it is unfinished, even if there's stuff missing, when they first see it. You don't want these issues to be kind of clouding over everything else.
Yep. You want to put
But,
your best foot forward.
yeah, because that's how you get people to get interested in your game. If you release on Steam your very first version of the game and it is completely unplayable, why would people want to go back to it and play it again? The masochists probably would, but not too many other people.
That's the reason why you go back and play all these bad games.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
how many times have you played Sekiro because of that?
mm-hmm. But ultimately, when it comes to playtesting and accepting feedback, you need to be open to this because the playtesters and by a larger extent your consumer base, they're the people who are going to be hopefully giving you money. And like we've said, if you don't care about, game development as a business, if you don't care about earning money off of your games, everything that we talk about you can ignore. But if you are trying to make the best marketable and the best product, not art piece, but product, then you need to be able to take that feedback and work with it. And again, people are going to tell you your game is the best thing ever, don't change anything. Or your game is the worst thing ever,
Change everything.
yeah. Or, you're a horrible person, never work in the game industry again.
Or this is just a
And
cheap asset flip.
yeah, and it's pay to win.
Yep.
And it hurts, but you can't shut down because of it. And there are developers out there, like we said, who any feedback they get, they immediately go 100% into it, no matter what that is. Just as there are developers who any feedback they get that they don't like, they completely shut it off. They will never even comprehend it. And you have to be willing to listen. And you have to, like we've said, it's like being either like a game dev doctor or a game dev detective. You have to read between the lines, understand what people are really saying. Like we said, 20 people could leave you 20 different comments about how jumping works in your game, and they could all be citing the same problem, but coming at it from 20 different angles.
Yep. And something else we didn't talk about that now I realize that we need to talk about is, you know, actually being able to take this stuff because, like, there's, feedback that is going to be really nasty and,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be prepared for it. Your game is shit, you should go kill yourself kind of
Yeah.
shit. And you need to be prepared for that. And you need to know how to filter this stuff properly and stuff like that. You filter it
Yeah.
straight to the trash can. Now, if they say
Mm-hmm.
your game is shit, I can't jump for shit, go kill yourself. Then at that point, you need to take everything out. You need to break it up into sections, and it can't jump for shit. And then you keep that part and throw the other pieces in the garbage can, and you can't jump for shit. So now you know there's a problem with this individual with jumping, and that's where
And
you can look into it, and you got to dissect this feedback.
And I would also have one other important point. This is a great tip that I think Nils Anderson from Clay told me. This was way back when we were talking about Don't Starve. That any feedback that they receive on the forums that was, polarized or, detrimental or harmful, he would always wait. Like, he would read it, and then he would wait like 30 minutes to an hour before he would actually respond to it. Like, he would let that initial hit kind of fade away because he
Yeah,
doesn't want, the drop dead, you're a horrible person to color what he's going to say. Again,
you
we're
don't want
not
to reply
saying,
in anger.
yeah, exactly. You don't want to be saying, oh, you don't like my game, go F yourself. That is definitely not what you want to say on a public forum. But
Nope.
again, it's all about that diplomacy. And you have to, this is again why if you're not comfortable with this stuff, get a PR person to do it for you or a
Or
community
become
manager.
comfortable with it.
But you need somebody who has these skills in your corner.
Yep. And it's very, very hard when somebody says mean things to you and you not to say mean things back because that is
Mm-hmm.
human nature. If somebody
Mm-hmm.
tells you, go to hell, what is the instant response back to them? You go to
Uh-huh.
hell.
And then we just repeat that over and over again.
Yep. It's
Yep.
like a game of tennis, you're just hitting the same insult back and forth.
Hell tennis. There we go. I think we just created something.
Insult tennis.
Yeah. Like the Monkey Island insult minigame, but in tennis form. I think we just came with the.
Maybe what we do is we make a game out of that, and
Mhm.
basically it's a tennis game kind of thing. And every time you hit it, you put a different insult in it, and
Mhm.
and then you just
Mario Tennis with swearing.
yeah.
There we go. Somebody make that game.
What would you call it?
But
Yeah, effing
insult
tennis.
Mario and Tennis. I'm sure that won't get Nintendo to copyright that. But we are getting really off topic here. So let's wrap things up for this week. So, as a preview for our next topic, we're going to be talking about understanding your limits and scope, and probably how to prepare for future games. If there is somehow more time, we'll talk about platforms for success. But at this rate, there should probably be at least two more parts for this series.
Probably.
So, if you are new,
And then there's
be
the other part after that.
which one?
Remember there was three core parts, and this is just breaking apart the middle of the two core parts.
We'll have to check our list afterwards.
Remember
So I'm not sure.
remember how there was the part zero?
Mm-hmm. With the marketing, understanding your
Yeah,
marketing.
yeah. Remember, and then like all of these topics we're looking at now is all that second
Mm-hmm.
topic, and then there was a third topic after that.
All right. Well, we'll
But
see
the
when we
second
get
topic
there.
got broken up into so many casts.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. So for those of you new or returning watching, thank you so much for tuning in. You'll find links to all of our respective Discords and social media in the description down below.
Yep, and be sure to lick the smash button, smash the like button on both my channel and Josh's channel. Again, links to all the YouTubes and Discords to both of us are down in the description, as well as the links to the other parts of this uh mini series. Actually, it's not so many at this point.
Yeah. And if you want to catch these shows live, we do them Sundays starting at 4 p.m. ET. If you want to catch our Indie Inquiry show where we review indie game store pages, we move that to Mondays at 4 ET on our respective channels.
Hmm.
But I think that will do it. And if you have any suggestions for future topics for anything that we cover, let us know.
Yep.
But with that said, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where exactly they are in science of games. Until our next show, take care.
Yeah.